Hello everybody, I'm Packy. Welcome back to my Just Get Her Done series. And stay tuned for why. This is the beginning of the real journey to Tennessee. So here we go, a real whirlwind of a year. My little Nova is a senior. This is her senior prom.
We're just trying to be silly to make it not so serious that my little Nova's growing up. Through the years, she had her different award ceremony. This one happens to be for band. And then boom, bada bing, we're at graduation. Where the best moments are when you can throw up your tassel hat and then turn around and try to find yours again before hugging and waving and exiting the field towards your adult life. Yay, Nova, way to go. Along this busy time frame for my daughter in high school, we managed to make several trips to Tennessee trying to find our property. A lot of times I was on them solo and had to entertain myself with singing, which you don't want to hear about that. And then you can just tell the further south you go, the more beautiful it is. This is just a quick image of that. Beautiful scenery, and you can't pass up Buc-ee's. I mean, it's the cheapest gas, the best clean bathrooms with no lines to wait in, and then shortly thereafter, you're in Tennessee. Now, this is just one of the properties that fell through for us, but I just wanted to show you the best part of it. This is the kind of stuff that's drawn us to Tennessee. Look at that view, and look at the whole goal of eventually getting to some front porch sitting. I mean, can't have any higher goals than that. Some more beautiful scenery that we discovered in Tennessee along the way. This is our road off of the Cherahalla Skyway, and it's got some beautiful waterfalls and camping areas. And I would say the most amount of trips that I've made other than to Tennessee would be to Lowe's, which is always a hassle when you have to sort your pieces out for your new projects, which I kept on track with my projects at home as well as for my clients, trying to get those done, which is very important now to complete this list for the house, because we need to wrap this house up that I'm working on in order to put it up for sale and get a good price out of it, so that I can put that money into the property we just signed off on in Tennessee. And celebrating at Bradley's barbecue pit. And you can see I've been fitting in all this stuff at the same time I've been. What's the earth-shattering news? Well, I've taken time off for my clients, and I'm finally done with Andy and Amy's dining set, which they loved, by the way. So let's get to it. What are we striking off this week?
I need to start by removing the rest of this old T111, which looks like it was never completely finished with a solid coat of paint. I don't know, weathering does happen fast, especially when the correct paints aren't used. There's a hole up here in this top corner that I stuff full of insulation. It's a gap between the framing of this exterior space and the actual original structure of the house. Can you find me? So down in this corner, there was a bit of framing that was sticking out further than the rest of the framing, and I had to cut that flush so that the plank that I'm putting up can sit flat against the structure. I'm using PVC planks for this project. I feel they are a good weather resistant product, and being that they're already a nice white, I'm hoping to do this project without having to paint afterwards. But it is a paintable product. It will hold the paint well. In order to make this as weather resistant as possible, I'm planning on caulking every plank into place. so that there is no area where moisture can penetrate behind and get to the wood that's underneath. I started this project with cutting the planks into place with the proper dimensions of the openings, but around this point one of the planks had such a narrow length to it that it actually snapped in half while I was in the middle of cutting it. So I decided to start leaving everything oversized with the intention of coming in after the planks were done and trimming all the excess material back with a flush routering bit. The lattice and screen that was in these lower sections just wasn't keeping the wild animals out, and it was failing miserably. The screens were torn through, the lattice was spliced in all the wrong areas, so it had no strength and was bowing and broken in many areas. Another thing was there were two slivers of space running up along both sides of the door with a thin part of lattice. I mean, I don't know if you can picture that, but lattice with a pattern, not only were they not equal sizes on each side of the door, they weren't equal sizes from the bottom to the top, which really, in a thin slice, just is very noticeable and ugly. I just knew something needed to be done so that uneven spaces around the door wasn't a focal point. I decided to remove the door and have all of the space on one side of the door for a cat entrance. Also, whenever I could get to it, I would fix the bottom sections as needed to try to keep the wild animals out, which is why I decided to go with the solid pallet wood. So as I am getting started on this outdoor project, it actually is the final phase of a long overdue project that if I would have just gotten to it, it would have all been done by now. It is getting dark fast, so I really need to just focus on getting this top section finished before packing it up for the night. You can't see on the camera angle, but between this band board and the rafters for the roof, there's an actual opening that's straight into the attic. All this needs sealed up so that small animals don't try to move in overnight. Okay, so this wasn't so early. I actually had to finish installing the rest of the planks in the lower sections on the other side. So this is later in the day. Here I'm using that flush routering bit to cut back all of the hangover material. Overall, that technique worked out great, but especially on these lower sections where the corners of the wood was not completely straight, the router bit wanted to follow the imperfections, which I didn't take into account. So in this case, in hindsight, it would have been better to cut these to size while I was installing so I could have made those perfect straight lines. Sweeping all of this mess up seemed to take forever. And yeah, I would suggest wearing a mask while routering that material. Probably wasn't the best thing to breathe in, and I really wish I had taken the time to go get mine. It just shows how stubborn I am in the moment when I have tunnel vision. And it is already starting to get dark again. I'm just going to hurry up and cut down some trim pieces for the next morning. I'm using leftover planks and any over material that was cut out earlier. So this is how I trimmed each bottom section out. And over here, this side is already done. I need to paint the doorstop white as part of it will remain exposed after I install planks on the inside of the door jamb. This will help this section of the door jamb remain weather resistant. I also need to start layering over some of my measuring marks. This piece, I think it was the broken off section of the piece I couldn't use, but there was still enough of the plank left that was usable, and I thought the marks would come off with some acetone or paint thinner. I was wrong, that didn't work, so I need to layer on some paint in order to make these marks go away. And it looks like it's going to take several coats, so I'm just going to focus on the actual marks for the first couple of coats, and then later I will be able to paint the whole section in to where it will disappear. For these upper sections, first I have to use a flat razor to trim off any of the caulk that was sticking out of the seam. Then I use a utility knife to crisp up the corners from the rounded corner left by the router bit. I'm using these very thin pieces of trim that will just cover the seam between the PVC and the painted wood. I will go ahead and caulk that seam while I install this trim. The reason I'm doing this is just to have one more layer of sealing that seam in to try to keep everything as waterproof as possible, or should I say water resistant. You may be wondering why I'm not just doing the exact same thing I did on the bottom. Well, for two reasons. One, it's because the bottom wood was not sealed or protected by any kind of paint or sealant. So it needed to be finished out in a way that would be water resistant. And up on the top, because of the screen, I don't want another layer of material being pushed all the way up to the screen. So those are the two reasons why I chose to trim these cut edges out differently. I cut it flush to fit it in, but I decided to cut the inside corners to 45. It'll just look so much better after the trim is installed. This was the first nice enough day out that we have had in about a week or so. I am disappointed that I did not entirely finish this project. I was one piece of trim short, and these pieces were so flimsy that I wasn't able to go in with a finishing caulk to make sure there was no open seam at all, which I like to make sure the caulk is all the way to the front surface. And when it's so flimsy that even between the nails, when you'd want to push caulk in, it would manipulate and move the piece. So I knew I was going to have to walk away, let those dry in where I nailed them into, and come back at a later time, the next good weather day, in order to finish up any caulking. I'll also need to finish caulking in all the nail holes. I have been working on that the whole process through. Every time I had extra caulk or too much caulk in a seam, I would move it from the seam, clean off the seam, and use the extra caulk and fill in nail holes. Another thing, looking back on this project, is a little disappointing is that some of the caulking is already yellowing. So although I picked this product so I would not have to paint it, it actually looks like it would look better if it was gone over with a coat of paint to just be that last finishing touch that makes everything smooth and crisp. Unfortunately, at this time of year, it's just not possible to do an exterior painting project. There's not enough good weather days for the curing process to complete before there's high moisture days. So this is just going to have to wait till spring to get painted, and it's probably on the new homeowners to get done. Another major disappointment on this project is the bottom edge on this exterior wall. Using the flush cut router bit did not work well along this line. The bottom edge of the floor system was not smooth, therefore the router bit followed too many imperfections. Therefore, I did not get a good smooth straight line, and instead I actually ruined what I already had. The night was coming on fast, and I just didn't think I would be able to fix this that quickly. So I just called it a night, thought that it would be best to process it and come back when there was another gap in the weather to try to make a straight line on the bottom of this edge. So there is no final reveal for this video. Instead, I am showing you an almost done project. I think that my followers know by other projects, this space will be finished to the final detail. but I can't wait until another month goes by to show you what I've been doing. I will get to the finishing details as weather permits, such as setting in nail holes below the surface, filling in holes and seams, and straightening that bottom edge. I am certain you get a good idea of the improvements made to this space inside and out. Well, this past week really didn't yield a lot of time for me to be out working on this project. So I did go ahead and get started on another project, but to me, it was just as much of a mental block as outside has been a weather block. I mean, what does one do with this? I've had this piece for several months now, and it's been residing in a file back in my brain, trying to wait for a miracle of inspiration or enlightenment on what I need to do with this piece to make. None has come. None. Knowing that I'm running out of time here and need to get this piece out of the house has really triggered me to force myself to find inspiration for this piece. I started searching the web for some inspiration, but I'm not finding anything there either. Nothing coming into that file way back in the back. Nothing. Nope. Nada. But anyway, thanks for joining me for this week's project, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to check back next week to see if a miracle happened. As always, stay safe out there. Ah, come up here if you want to be. Your claws hurt. Nope, nada. Nothing firing on that level.